Hi, everyone. See the red button down below? Hit subscribe. Thank you so much for your support. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Shannon Confidential. I am Shannon, your host. And Shannon Confidential is a podcast about life, love, and everything in between. And today we're going to do a lot of laughing in between because we'll be speaking with Allie with Obedient, and that is a humor branding marketing agency. Now, that to me is the best type of marketing. I love humor. I can't get enough of it. The commercials that are out there, I find to be so creative, and to be branding this way, I think it's incredible. It's my favorite. I have a very odd and inappropriate sense of humor, so I truly enjoy when someone uses humor in their branding. I can't wait to dive in with Allie. She's also a podcaster. She has a podcast called Brandsplaining, and can you brand that, as well as Fangasm? Yeah, Fangasm. I will let her explain all three of those, and they are all three very different and very funny. I've watched them, and I think you will too. I'll link you up in the show notes. But in any case, I can't wait to introduce you to Allie with Obedient, and just laugh with us this afternoon. All right, Allie with Obedient, talk to us. I did your intro. I let everybody know just how excited we are to just hear everything you have to say about your humor branding, your 3 podcasts that are hysterical. Yes, I did watch. There's so much about you. Just please, Allie, welcome to Shannon Confidential.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Oh my gosh. All right. So tell us about you, how you got into this. I just love humor, and marketing with humor is the best kind. So just dive in, go.
Yeah. Well, so how I got into this world, my career path, I worked at a consulting firm. 2 gals that I worked with, they jumped ship and they started one of the first subscription box companies to market. And at the time I had a fairly popular local Chicago blog. So I was working with them, but I also had this little pet project where I wrote humorous or satirical pieces around like life in your 20s. And anyway, they asked me if I wanted to join as their VP of engagement and really lead the charge for them in terms of tone of voice and brand personality and kind of the whole look, feel, and vibe and persona of a brand. And I never done that professionally, but I always loved to write and I always loved humor, and that's the style they wanted. So it gave me a chance to kind of try it out in a different manner. And so I did that for about a year and a half. And then I really liked it and I enjoyed it. So I decided to go off on my own and do it professionally as a solopreneur. And so I started to get hired on projects to step in and help with branding, but I had no professional training per se, or background beyond kind of that, experience I had, but I had a knack for it. And I think not having agency experience was a win. And around the same time, so my best friend and business partner was a copywriter, and she did a lot of comedy writing as well. And after a few years of being on our own, we decided, hey, we're doing a lot of things similarly, and we have a very aligned perspective on marketing and branding, and we do things in a way that we don't really see in our industry, but yet it's incredibly effective. And I think it's delightful for all parties involved. What if we started an agency built on this premise that fun sells, and there's just a better way to approach marketing and branding?
I love that.
And so we started Obedient 6 years ago, myself and Lindsay, who's, like I said, my best friend, and haven't looked back. And it's been just the best thing in the whole wide world.
How fun is that? First of all, you get to use humor, which is what you have a knack for. You get to start your own business, and then you get to start your own business with your bestie.
Yeah.
And then your job is to laugh all the time.
Yes.
That's awesome.
It's the coolest thing in the whole wide world. I truly think that I hit the mother lode in terms of career, truly, because when we started it, we wanted to not only do something we really enjoyed and really liked, but do it in a way that was very suitable for our, lifestyle. And we didn't want to become prisoners of our own making. So we really tried to build in some of those like delightful, wonderful, enjoyable, exciting principles into just how we run our agency as well. So brainstorms are really fun. The whole client experience we develop is a hoot. So yeah, it's been great.
Explain. Okay, I'm a client. I'm coming in, and I would like to say, you know what? I'm going to try humor in my marketing.
Yeah.
And I've watched you with Lindsay do your brainstorming and coming up with different ideas, and it is a riot. I could imagine it's probably not how you do it with a client.
Yeah, very different, very different. But yeah, in terms of, when a client is working with us for the first time, we really try to practice what we preach and make every step in our process as enjoyable and delightful and memorable and fun and entertaining and exciting as we intend to do for their business. And so every email's funny, every, the whole setup process of getting them acclimated to our project management system is entertaining. We have a fake robot that writes our email, or not. We have this, this fake created entity who's a robot named Rob that writes some of our emails, wink, wink. We have a fake intern named Gary that we use to deploy some of our marketing messages. And so when a client comes into our process, like, we want it to be exciting and energizing tip to tail. The way we do our intake questionnaire and our kind of, first brand discovery call, we want to ask questions in a way they've never been asked before. We want them to get their wheels turning differently. Yeah. We don't do any live brainstorming per se with clients. That's very much something we do internally. You got to get all the bad ideas behind, get them out behind closed doors. It's not something you want your clients seeing necessarily, but when we present our concepts and our ideas, we try to do it in a really, energizing, exciting way and get people to be thinking about things a little bit different when they're engaging in the content. So yeah, it's been just the coolest thing to be able to have full control over that creative piece of running our business.
So I can only imagine. Now, here's the thing. You guys have, experience, and you're funny, and you might have an idea of what's funny, but have you brought an idea to somebody? And, not everybody has a sense of humor, and that's just a fact. Mine seems to be a little bit more perverted, and weird, and inappropriate, but that's not necessarily what you want to do in marketing. Sometimes
but
have you ever just tried to bring something to somebody and they are just like, yeah, no, it's just not going to work. And you're just like, no, it's awesome. Like, how do you transition funny? Because funny is not the same for everybody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, first of all, we hope to weed some of those folks out in some of the initial intake calls and conversations, right? If you don't trust that we can bring something to the table that really keeps your audience in mind and can communicate on behalf of your brand in an entertaining, humorous way, then we're probably not the right agency for you from the start. Now, a lot of people come to us and they maybe don't have too many funny bones in their body. When we're writing, we are not writing based on our own sense of humor, like what we think is personally funny. I really like offbeat humor. I like jokes that tend to happen a beat later than most people would laugh. Like, I really like comedy that makes you think for a second and you go, oh my God, yes. Oh, yeah. And that doesn't always work in marketing, right? So my preferred style isn't universal, but what we're doing is we're looking at their audience, and based on their audience, their demographic, their goals, their industry, what voice and what persona, what tones, what approaches we think would be really effective at communicating their message in a unique, fresh, exciting way. And so when we're sharing our ideas and we're presenting concepts and we're showing, copy that we've written, we're getting them primed that this is not what you like. This is what your audience will resonate with, right? So you have to take your own preferences off the table. And so we do a lot of, I guess I would call it coaching up front that, okay, again, you're going to you may not get something entirely. It might not make sense to you. Let's talk about it. Let's have a conversation, but ultimately you may not be the demographic you're trying to speak to. So they have to be willing to kind of lay down their own personal preferences as well.
Oh my gosh, I just love it. And you have the podcast, and and I've seen, you write the different publishings that you've done and the different companies you work with. You're legit.
Oh, thank you.
I have to tell everybody who's worked with you and what you've done. I mean, you know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, we've worked with some really great brands. I mean, we just have wrapped a couple projects with Native, which is a big natural personal care brand. We just named an ice cream for Blue Bunny, which is very cool, and did all their packaging copy and flavor names. We've worked with Choice Organics. We've done some work for the Dallas Cowboys. I mean, yeah, we've done a lot of great work. University of Chicago, which is a major educational institution. So we've done some really cool work across industries. And again, I think the really neat part is it really challenges our ability to flex into so many different styles and tones, because how we write for Blue Bunny, which is very family friendly, might be different how we're writing when we're on behalf of an educational institution, or a little bit more provocative brand that is willing to kind of push the boundaries or edges a little bit. We worked with a fertility company, for example, so we could lean into innuendo a little bit more, where that obviously wouldn't fly in a lot of industries. So yeah, it's been really cool to be able to really look at a brand in an industry and know what we can do here, and how do we make it unique and exciting, while also be cognizant of what's going to land.
Yeah, because and it never occurred to me. I saw humor. I have my humor, sarcastic and appropriate. What do you want to call it? Some of it's silly, but then you actually made a good point. There are so many different kinds of humor. There's silly, witty, controversial. There's dry. There's sarcasm. There's so many different ways to look at humor, and that almost seems like shoelace is stupid. Like, duh, yeah, that makes sense. But until you said it, and then you start to think about that in a marketing way, that's. You can market sarcastically with some industries, but way not in others, so you do have to know the different ways that's going to be, perceived. And with saying that, do you test it?
Yeah, I mean, definitely I think the things that, well, first, let me just hit on what you said is I think people forget, they think humor is such a blanket statement, and it's all encompassing, but there are so many styles, tones, characteristics, tactics, approaches. I mean, there's things like juxtaposition, self-referential, alliteration. Like, there's a lot of ways to creatively write and communicate that are wildly different from one another. And so it's deploying all of them in an appropriate, cohesive way. But to answer your other question, which I just forgot, say that again.
Do you test?
So the thing that we think it makes the most sense to test are naming. You can test everything, right? Like, you can run qualitative market research for every piece of copy you write, right? There's even people that do A/B testing with websites and things like that. I think naming is incredibly important, to field testing for that, as well as ad campaigns to see what'll land and resonate. So those are always two biggies that we always recommend, because you don't really know what's going to land entirely. So it's cool to see. We did some when we worked with University of Chicago, we were rolling out a big health research campaign, and we were deploying a few different styles of humor because we wanted to see what would resonate. And what we found, weirdly enough, is that they had 3 core demographics that really were potential partners that engage in health research, right? And each of our different campaigns resonated with a different demographic. And so they ended up using all of them and just deploying them in different areas.
I was just ask that. Yeah.
Yeah. So they were all effective just for different individuals. So that was really cool to see, what resonated where. So yeah, that definitely happens as well.
Yeah, that was, my next question. Okay, so if you test it, but if you are, some of these industries might be, maybe more to a certain state or to a certain area, but you mentioned industries that are, across the US or maybe even globally. And humor in this area could be the polar opposite of humor here. Humor overseas is different than humor here.
Yeah.
So you almost have to, if they're going to run with you, like you said, you have to have that transitional humor in different areas, because just because it goes over in one area does not necessarily mean it's going to go over in another.
For sure. I mean, there's a lot of words that even it, culturally differ. Language is used in varying ways. So you have to take all of that into account, right? I mean, the way we in the US use the term fanny versus how it's used, in the UK is completely different. So, I mean, not that we're using that in, many campaigns, but just like that's a word that has a very different meaning somewhere else. So those are all things we have to take into consideration. That's what we're working with our client to have. If they're in the market that we are focused on, then we are going to kind of run some of those things by them and make sure that we're not running into any, cultural missteps, because that's something that we want to avoid. But there are just universal things that make people laugh and they relate to. Like, I think just humanizing language and relatability, and like there are a lot of things that are just universal, which is great too.
So I know I love watching people spoof themselves. If you're a celebrity and you I don't want to say dumb yourself down, but you spoof yourself. I mean, you are what you are. I like those because those to me seem real when you're willing to take it on yourself. It just seems more honest, more sincere, and to put humor and honesty at the same sentence is kind of tricky. But yet when you spoof it on yourself or your industry, it goes over very well, at least for me.
Yeah, I think self-deprecation and just being self-referential and having self-awareness in some of the language you use, I think is an awesome way to build rapport and have humility. And people, I think, they like people who don't take themselves so seriously all the time, or have enough self-awareness. Now, I think it can also become shticky. So it's like it has to be believable and it has to be honest. And I think that that's something else is, there's sometimes when celebrities maybe don't get it right. It's like you're trying to be relatable and you maybe are not presenting a relatable image. So I think that that juxtaposition doesn't always fly. But I do think that like we do a lot of self-deprecation, and we kind of joke about ourselves, or we might mention a ridiculous campaign idea that we realized was like absurd. Like we talk about things like that. I think that's even in our brainstorms, we tease each other and we roll our eyes at each other if it's like a bad idea. And we know, and that's okay. Like they're not all we like to just play and have fun. And I think ideation, you have to let all the ideas out, especially to get to the great ones. So yeah, I think it's a great thing to be able to do, is to just have some humor and humility with yourself too.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. What I have to ask you, have you ever been, just say an industry comes to you and they're like, okay, we want to use some humor and we're thinking about something like this. Or have you ever had an industry or a suggestion, an idea that you just went, whoa, hold on, I'm stumped right now. Where do we go with this?
We've had people present their ideas to us a few times, but I think that we're good at talking people away from their bad ideas, or presenting counter arguments, or, hey, what if we took this kind of core element and we changed it? Like we had one client that really wanted to go hard in the paint on cancel culture. And we said that there is a better way to have a dialogue about the thing you want to joke about. You're going to get into hot water if you try to take that on. So let's cancel your product. Like they wanted to faux cancel one of their products. Let's do it in a way that's not like, why even get yourself involved in that sticky conversation? Because they're not a controversial brand. So like they would not have been able to bode well in that scenario. We've also had a couple people, we had run workshops historically, and you'd be shocked at how many males at the end come up to us because they want to one up our humor and want to prove they're funnier than us. I mean, it's like, it's a running joke. Like if I had a nickel for every time a guy came up to us at the end of a workshop and wanting to like bombard us with all of their best jokes and all the things that they say are funny about their own brand. And I'm just like the eye roll of all eye rolls. It's like, yeah, a fart joke isn't like a creative strategy. I hate to break it to you, but okay.
Oh,
if it works for you and you like it, then cool. But yeah, so like, we sometimes, but like, it's not my job to tell people they're on the wrong track if they're not hiring us to make it better. I mean, so, I smile and nod and go, hey, you might want to just spend some more time with that, or think it through with a little
Sleep
bit
on
more
it.
detail, or sleep on it, or, but yeah, it's hilarious.
Oh my gosh. So when you're doing the branding, you're doing the wording, the way it's going to be presented, how you're anticipating how it's going to be received. Are
Mhm.
you also doing the okay, I think, you should do it with a woman saying this, and this is the background it should be. Are you doing, like, is it just wording, or is it branding with where there's a commercial and there's acting, because that's huge. Because if you can't deliver it, it's not a joke.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so initially we were full service, that we were kind of touching everything tip to tail. Now we really stay in kind of the ideation messaging lane. We do design and really take on the whole creative piece for ads. We don't do any commercials though. We don't really deal too much with video content. We've done some scripting, some things like that, but yeah, we don't get into commercial work. That's just an arena we're not particularly interested in. It's just it's just a whole different world, right? Like, you are getting involved with, beyond scripting, it's who are you hiring to deliver this, location setting. I mean, there's just a million things to think about. And we really want to kind of stay in the idea lane. But yeah, we definitely have ideas on visuals. Like, that's why we kind of have ownership when we're doing more static ad campaigns, just because if the visuals don't match, then it's not going to work.
Yeah.
So we have to have our pulse on that as well.
Oh my gosh. This is so needed. And so it's just like, to me, it's a no-brainer because I love marketing with humor. But you're right. It's not out there a lot. And why do you think that is?
I think that most brands play it safe, right? I think that I think a lot of brands, I'll use brands as if they're an entity, but brands believe that they want to be so not controversial that they end up just watering themselves down to the point that they don't really say anything meaningful or interesting or unique. I think sometimes there's too many cooks in the kitchen. So, and other people's personal perception of what a brand should do or be or say gets involved, and they might not be funny or good at writing or creative concepting or any of that. And I think it's hard to do. I think there's a difference between being a comedian and writing jokes and then coming up with which is very hard in a whole different way, right? Going up there and doing a 5-minute stand-up set is very difficult and courageous undertaking that I would want nothing to do with, because it's that's very difficult and challenging.
Comedians are brilliant. They're brilliant.
Yeah. But that's very different. Joke writing is very different than creating a whole cohesive brand strategy that infuses a really entertaining, humorous persona. I mean, that's just a whole different beast. So yeah, I think that sometimes people they'll hire an intern to come in and write copy. And that's why when people attempt humor, sometimes it fails, because it's just someone comes in and it's there's a million cooks in the kitchen. There's no strategy. There's no cohesion. There's no rhyme or reason. And they're just throwing in outdated references. And I don't know, it just looks messy. And so then they go, oh, it didn't work. Well, it's it didn't work because there wasn't a reason behind your rhyme. So there's a lot of I think there's a lot of layers to it for sure.
So you've mentioned a couple of times, and I was thinking the same thing, too many cooks in the kitchen. So when you're talking about using humor in branding for an industry, and there's usually not just one person making all the decisions. There's, you got legal, you've got this, you've got that.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of chefs in the kitchen, and trying to not convince, or just trying to show that here's a marketing strategy that would be funny, that would work with your industry. It would work with your client base. It would do that. But you've got 6 other people in the room going, well, I don't know. How do you work through that?
It's tricky. That's why we try to have all the key stakeholders in the conversations out the gate, because, you get into situations where all of a sudden you think you're talking to all the main players, And then you're at the final stage where you deliver the final deliverable. And then they're like, oh, we got to run it by legal, or we have to run it by our senior VP. And that senior VP hasn't been brought into any of the conversation. And then they're just using their own personal preference to like hack things apart. I mean, we've seen, it's heartbreaking, but we've seen like awesome copy and campaign ideas be signed off on and be like, oh my God, this is the best. This has been a great project. We love you guys. Can't wait to show you what it looks like in the wild. And then they hand it to a designer and the designer goes, nah, I don't like that. And they just hack it apart. And now it doesn't make any sense.
It's not even
so like
anymore.
Yeah, it's like, that happens sometimes, and it sucks. It does. It's heartbreaking. We try to get ahead of all that. We try to pre-address some of those things. It's like, hey, if it ever gets in someone's hand and they don't understand it, or they want it to explain what our thought process was or why we think it's strong as is, then like bring us back into the convo. And sometimes that happens, and sometimes it doesn't. I mean, you also get weird things, like someone will get their hands on copy and they'll have like a weird personal relationship. Like, oh, my ex-boyfriend's name was Kevin, so I don't like this line. Like, it's just still, it's like the stuff that you can't even plan for, that you go like, what? Oh, okay. Yeah. Like it's just wild stuff like that. So, overall we have great clients, but we have run into weird situations where you're like, oh my God, I don't even know what to do at this stage. So, but I think that's just creative work in general. You can only do what you do and explain so much. And then, people hack your work apart sometimes. So,
or like you said with the guys, and I just say guys because you use guys as an example. You got someone who wants to outwit you, and like, well, what about this line? You're like, just sit back and do what you do, and let me do what I do.
It happens. Or sometimes people feel compelled to add 3,000 exclamation points, and you're like, okay, well, that ruins the joke. Like, it's supposed to be a dry delivery, and when you just add, an exclamation mark here and for there, it's like, it just changes the whole tone. So like weird things like that, or people want to, they
put in a funny emoji.
They want to put weird emojis, like just like all this kind of stuff that happens in the back end. You're just like, oh boy. So, it can be tricky sometimes, but we do our best.
I have to tell you. So that's obedient, which I think is brilliant. I think everybody should just be like calling you, trying to figure out how to work with obedient. And again, everything Allie related and obedient related will be in the show notes. I'll make sure you guys are all hooked up.
Oh, awesome.
And I'm going to let you say your last name, because I know I said it once and I'm so afraid to botch it.
No, you're fine. Well, it's funny. I think people make it sound fancier than it is. So it's LeFevere.
LeFevere. Okay.
LeFevere. Yeah. Okay. And everyone, rightfully so, everyone wants to put a French spin on it, because it is a French last name. It's my husband's last name, but his family pronounces it LeFevere. They do not say LeFevere.
I was going the whole Brett LeFevere.
Yeah, I know. I get it.
Okay, so it looks like it should look,
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so now you have to go in and explain all of these podcasts that you have with Lindsay, because you do all three with Lindsay, correct?
I do. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And they're all different. And that's what's so funny is they're all humorous in their own way, but yet different. So you pick which one you want to talk about first.
Yeah. Okay. I'll run through. So we have one called Brandsplaining. So Brandsplaining, it's our business/comedy podcast. So when we started that one, the idea is there a way to have a business podcast that isn't like every other business podcast out there? It's not just, maybe interviewing people broadly. Like, can we get really nation specific? Can we gamify it? Can we make it really fun and unique and interesting? So we've done a couple different seasons of Brandsplaining. So season 1, we wanted to bring on guests who had really funny, entertaining brands. And so we brought them on and we did interview them, but we played a lot of games. We put them on the spot in really funny ways. Like, we'd make them fill out these really absurd questionnaires, and then we'd use that information to just make them tell embarrassing stories. I mean, just all in good fun and good humor. Everyone was great. So we did that for a season. We decided I'm going to kind of pivot and talk about our other show. And because it comes back to Brandsplaining. Then we have this other show we've done for the past 18 months called Can They Brand That? And Can They Brand That is a video show where we pick a brand. We don't do any research about the brand. We set the timer for 20 minutes and we just riff as many creative ideas as we can. And then we take that 20-minute, we cut it down to like 3.5 of our kind of silliest, wildest moments, and we put it out for the world to see. But that's video. So we decided to do our second season of Brandsplaining, like a deeper dive into Can They Brand That? Let's show like the whole 20-minute brainstorm and let's dissect it a little bit and talk about our approach and our tactics, or why we went down this rabbit hole, or what was kind of the takeaway here, or what are some bigger ideas that would kind of spiral from some of the things that came up on in the initial brainstorm. So that was really fun because that gave people like a behind the scenes of a little bit more depth and detail into our Can I Brand That? And so that was the second season of Brandsplaining. And then the third, we have yet to create a third season of Brandsplaining because we want it to be completely different. Now, every season we write a new jingle. We have a new intro and outro. It's a whole different concept. And so that's the plan, is like the third season of Brandsplaining will be an entirely different podcast structure. We have a bunch of ideas, but nothing set in stone. So we are still doing our regular Can They Brand That, the video version. We're really, we've gotten hired several times because of those, it's an awesome marketing tool, but it really started out as a way to just play and have fun and show people a little insight into the way our brains think when we're having a silly time together. Thank you. And then the third podcast is just a ridiculous, crazy a ridiculous, crazy creation that Lindsay and I had. So when Lindsay and I started the agency, we simultaneously started a podcast. And the podcast at the time was called, we wanted to start a comedy podcast, and it was called Potterotica. And the premise of the show was we were trying to think of things we knew a lot about and what's a really funny spin on it. So we both liked Harry Potter, which is like, of course, we're millennials. Of course we do, like the most cliche thing ever. But we're like, there is a whole world of fandom where people write fan fiction. So fan fiction is basically people pluck the characters out of their world and they create their own stories. Then there's this subgenre, it's erotic fan fiction. So we're like, I wonder if there is erotic Harry Potter fan fiction where all the characters are grown up and put in these like ridiculous scenarios. What if which
is hysterical in and of itself.
It's just the premise. We knew it was funny, right? And there are hundreds of thousands of these stories. So we said, okay, there's a built-in audience here because people are writing and people are reading it. So we decided to find these stories, get the author's permission. So they were in on the joke. We did not want to be making fun. We're not making fun of the author or their talent or their writing capabilities. We're teasing the characters in the story, but we do not read it in advance. We just make sure there's consent. We make sure everyone's of age, there's nothing illegal. And then we read the stories, episode by episode and chapter by chapter for the course of like 8 to 12 weeks. And so we did that for a couple years, and then we decided, why don't we expand beyond Harry Potter? And then so we did, and we the new name of the show is Fangasm, and we've read The Office, Game of Thrones, Stranger Things, Parks and Recreation. We've read all these Marvel, Star Wars, like all these crazy stories across fandom, and it is the most fun, silly, ridiculous thing. We were just the top 5 podcasts in India, which is crazy. We've been top 25 comedy podcasts in the US. It's a funny, delightful, entertaining premise. It's like, yes, we're reading about like sex, but in the most unsexy way humanly possible, because we're reading and commenting and
with different characters from different.
It's the best, silliest thing in the whole wide world. So, I love it.
So when you're saying you're reading the stories, are you like plucking a story out of something you found that somebody else wrote in that whole world, and then just kind of audibling it?
Yeah, exactly. So we find a story, but we look based on length of the story, fandom, characters that we know are in the story. And then we reach out to the author, get their permission, get a little bit more info about it. And then that's our story for the season. And we break it up into, like I said, 8 to 12 episodes. And, and then we read it for the first time on the air, which is so funny because there's something about also it's really fun to watch someone discover something for the first time. So like the discovery element of it is really exciting because we don't know what we're going to read. And so it's just wild. And we've read the wildest premises you could imagine. Like there was not to get into minutia, but one of our season 3 was a Harry Potter story, and one of the characters, like they often get set in like alternative realities. So it's, in this story, one of the main Harry Potter characters was sending in really bad dick pics to this local wizarding newspaper, and then there was a editor of the newspaper who would critique them, and then
Oh my God.
the person was sick, the editor was sick of getting bad dick pics, so he decided to teach a photography class, and then Harry Potter was sick of getting bad ratings on his dick pics, so he decided to take a photography class, and then they end up in, chaos ensues when they end up in the same class together. So there's just like all these silly, absurd scenarios that
Oh my
we
God.
end up with. Yeah, exactly.
Oh my God. So all right, you said there's, nobody underage. So you pluck these books out or these writings out and say there's 4 or 5 characters. Do you get 4 or 5 people involved, or do you guys do voices?
I mean, no, we do not do voices. We we do as jokes sometimes, but it's myself, Lindsay, and then our third co-host is our buddy Danny, who he came on as a guest season 1. We thought I did improv with him. We were improv dropouts. We had no desire to further that, but it was just a fun thing we did together. And I was like, Danny would be a hoot. And then he was so great that we kept him around and made him a permanent co-host, because he's just he's so funny, and he's witty and quick. And so it's just us 3. We rarely have ever had guests. We've had a guest like once. Or twice maybe, but yeah, it's just us. And so it's great. And we take turns reading every episode. So yeah,
I'm telling you, you guys are hysterical. I just think it's amazing that you stepped first, before any of this even happened, you stepped out and tried to do something on your own. And then you collaborated with your bestie, and then it just grew and grew and grew. And you're just successful. You're funny. You're good. You're incredibly professional. You're a riot. And now you have these 3 podcasts that are funny, but yet incredibly different. I mean, the whole Harry Potter thing is just too much. I mean, where do you go from there?
I mean, sorry, I'm plugging there we go. Where do we go from here? I mean, well, there's just so many things that we want to do to keep creatively exploring. I mean, when it comes to our agency, we have so many ideas in terms of like where we could take it. Do we kind of hone in on specific expertise? Like we're starting a subsidiary that focuses entirely on naming, because that's something we love to do, and it's so fun and exciting. We're going to keep, we've thought about creating some sort of like creative brainstorming game. We've thought of, other podcast concepts. Like, so we have all these ideas, but we're just truly so excited and occupied with our client work currently and what we're doing. It's wild. Like we have Fangasm, can they brand that, Brandsplaining, and then our agency work, and it's all fulfilling, and it's all energizing. It's all exciting. And we're trying to just do all of those things better. And I think after that, we'll kind of say like, well, where do we branch out from here? But also like maintaining like, I don't think we want to live in a world where we're working 100 hours a week. True. And that we're not enjoying ourselves. So we really try to always keep that in mind and balance those 2 things. But it's been all great so far. I mean, it doesn't mean running a business has challenges for sure, but like, in the grand scheme of things, we get to do work we really love. It's very creatively fulfilling, and we get to do it with people that we like think the world of. So it's pretty rad. Yeah.
Who would be, if you could reach out, like if there would be like a dream client, who would you love to brand with human?
I mean, I personally would love to work on a kids brand. I would like to work with like Barbie or something like that. Because like, I would love to go down in like a nostalgic rabbit hole, and like, how do we modernize it? And how do we come up with some like really delightful creative campaigns for kids? maybe something that's like clever that a kid would appreciate, and then also like clever that an adult would really resonate with. Yeah, I think I'm really drawn to potentially doing some work with like a kid's brand, or actually a potential client that approached us is working in the funeral space. And her whole goal is to, how do you like elevate the funeral experience to make it not so kind of heavy, like, how heavy of an experience it is. Like, how do you add some like lightness to it, and bring some, not, I wouldn't say humor, but I would say like humanize it, and make it uplifting and approachable and accessible, and like, especially because people are going through such difficult times. So that would be an awesome thing to be able to take on, is something that you would notoriously think there's no room for humor here. So how do you add humor in the most, like, again, humanizing, respectful, empathetic way? And from there, like, that version of humor is much more about like empathy, some humanity, and make like lightening the experience. So yeah, those are those are very extreme ends, but I'd either like to play and get sillier, or I'd like to really take on a tough industry, which would be like, that'd be hard, but I think really cool.
What's your favorite, now that you're in it, you have experience in it? If the answer is this is actually one of your own, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. What brand out there uses humor that you really thought, they got this one right? I respect.
Without mentioning any of our work, I think Burger King is always really funny. I think that they're a hoot. I'm trying to think of other brands that, like, God, it's weird that I can't, it's not that they don't exist. I'm just trying to think of ones that jump to top of mind.
Progressive commercials have
progressives
not being like the parents and stuff.
That they are hilarious. Yeah. Progressive. Thank you for bringing that one up. That one, I've actually gone on YouTube and just watched them several times because they crack me up. I think those are great. So
now that you know the work that comes behind it, and getting that whole part of that branding out, you realize how hard that is. And you have to I'm sure you look around and be like, all right, they did it. That's good. They got that one.
Oh, we love it. Listen, I would love to see better, more delightful, positive, uplifting branding out in the world, even if it does not come from us. I truly just,
I enjoy it so
same.
much.
It makes the whole like, why are we pretending? Like, the whole goal of marketing is to get people to buy your products ultimately. But like, how do you do that in an honest way, transparent, in a way that makes people feel good, that isn't predatory, that isn't meant to, exacerbate people's insecurities or perceived inadequacies? Like, how do you do that in a way that people feel like they have like an actual choice, and they're choosing to engage with your brand because it makes them feel better in a real way? So I just think that, I'm an advocate for just better, more hopeful, entertaining branding, because it's already all around us. Like, why not do better things with it?
Yeah. And I have to say, there's like, there's some serious commercials, or just commercials or branding, and I say commercials, meaning whether it be print or TV, whatever.
Yeah.
And I remember the ones that make me laugh.
Yeah.
I mean, those are the ones I remember, whether it be an ad or, something you read, something you print, something you see on a commercial, a billboard, whatever. I remember the ones that make me laugh. So that's huge because you're in business to sell and make money. Something.
Yeah. Well, there's actually science behind that. So there are 3 core emotions that cement in a memory. It releases adrenaline into your system and essentially locks in a memory. And they are when you feel fear, when you are grieving, or when you're laughing. And so that is why you see so often in marketing that people tend to use fear. They prey on your fears and inadequacies and your concerns and your worries. And you see that in political campaigns all the time, right? It's effective and it works. But we always say that the only one of the 3 that is positive is laughter. And it is so effective at doing the thing you want it to do without making your consumers feel terrible in the process. So why wouldn't you choose that path forward? I mean, there's a way to talk about everything without having to do it in a way that brings out and draws out the worst in your audience. Like you should want to elicit the most positive, engaged response. So it's like, all marketing is meant to elicit an emotion. You want to elicit the right ones for your audience to essentially take the right action. And also too, laughter is the only of the three that will build like long-term rapport and relationships, because after, fear works initially. It really does. But once you no longer fill the hole of your audience, I mean that in the most PG way, they're on to the next, right? Because you ultimately haven't given them something that is like positive or long-term to kind of hang their hat on. So, so that's another reason why laughter is just the coolest. I mean, we should want to do more of it. Yeah.
I think more people should contact you guys with Obedient and just run with it, because I love it. I pay attention to more brands that use humor. So I can only hope that, people start to wake up and realize it really does work, and it works for all the right reasons.
Agree. Couldn't agree more. Thank you for your glowing recommendation. I appreciate
it. That's my spiel. That's what I'm going to say.
Love it.
Well, I cannot wish you the best of luck with everything you're doing, with your new seasons, with any of the podcasts you're doing, any board games you come up with, any potential clients that come your way, and what you're doing with Obedient. I think it's brilliant. It's hysterical. It's wonderful. And keep at it. It's awesome, Allie. It really is.
Thank you, Shannon. I appreciate that. This has been lovely. You are such a delight. I love your energy. So thank you for having me on. It's been great.
Absolutely. And if you come up with another podcast, you better come back and tell everybody about it, because I want to hear about it. I want to know about it right away.
Love it. Will do. Promise.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being on Shannon Confidential. I truly just had so much fun getting to know you better and bringing it to everybody else. And I'm like looking forward to what's coming next for you.
Thank you. I will keep you abreast of all of it.
You got it. Thank you.